Okay, we're starting with a review of 1912 of Yud Tes Yud Beis. Naham kakfir zaf melech uchatal ezev ratzona. Like the roar of a young lion is the wrath of a king, and like dew on grass is his favor. And we favored Rabbeinu Yonah's interpretation, which was Rabbeinu Yonah says, Naham kakfir zaf melech, like the roar of a young lion is the wrath of the king. Ki gam yihye kamachrish v'lo yigar kashe, even when he is silent, meaning when the king is silent, and even when he doesn't roar in a harsh way, yidag adam, then man will have anxiety, v'yira mizaf, or should have anxiety, v'yare mizaf libo, and should be afraid of the wrath of his heart, kemo minaham hakfir, just like he is afraid of the roar of a young lion. It is impossible to have a king's wrath without harm. And the purpose of the pasuk is to instill fear of the kingship on a person. Like Chazal say, the fear of the kingship should always be upon you. And like dew on grass is his favor. It's impossible to have the favor of a king without benefit. Even when he does not promise man to benefit him. And he doesn't, and even when he doesn't inform man that he has intent to benefit him. Just like it's just like it's impossible to have dew on grass without benefit. And it compares the silent favor to dew on grass, which doesn't have a loud noise. It's funny he says it doesn't have a loud noise. Like if you listen really closely, you can hear the sound of the dew on the grass. Kol hamon hageshim, like the sound of a lot of rain. Okay, so Isaac, you said you had a memory of what yesterday's idea was?
Yeah, so I think normally with people, like they'll express how they're feeling, and they'll express how they're feeling and then act on it.
Yeah.
Or if they don't express it, then they won't act on it, and if they do, then it's like, then they were like holding a grudge, and then there's like also into like social ramifications, and so people in general don't like hold on to slights and then not show it, and also and the same is true for in terms of like if you do something good for someone, they don't like with most people you could like that's how that's what will happen. But with a king, because um like because he's in a position of like authority, he is able to um like he'll hold on to things and like and then like um get a person back if they made him angry, or favor someone if they good for him, um like even though they like you don't necessarily see it at like you don't necessarily see that he's like pleased with you or angry with you.
Okay, so that's good. So then what the missing piece is, what's the deal with the lion and the dew? Anyone?
Like meaning why is it different?
No, why is it even talking about, like, what's the idea? What's the muscle?
Yeah.
Because Isaac didn't mention, he mentioned the idea, but not the muscle.
Oh, I see. Well, the lion is like very loud, so like basically like don't think like even though you can't. I actually didn't hear everything I said. But,
oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I'll turn it louder. So I'll say what my understanding was, and you tell me if this is different than what you understood. So I'm gonna say it and repeat what Isaac said through the muscle. So the mistake is to treat the king's wrath and favor by the same standards that you would treat an ordinary person. So an ordinary person, if you do something good for them, then they're not necessarily going to reciprocate by benefiting you. And if you do something that makes them mad, they're not necessarily going to take revenge or retaliate. The king, however, will, and it will be extreme, meaning that he has the ability to completely destroy you, and he has the ability to change your life by benefiting you. And so the reason why this is being compared to the roar of a lion is it's saying, and the key is the first line in Rabbeinu Yonah is, when you upset the king and he either doesn't say anything or he doesn't say much, don't dismiss that and say, oh, he's not angry, nothing's going to happen to me. No, treat it as though he's a lion roaring at you, and therefore you should be very afraid. Likewise, if you do something good for him and he doesn't express gratitude or doesn't make promises of paying you back, don't say, oh, he didn't even notice it, or like, I can't expect anything good from him. No, to the contrary, just like you have an awareness of the benefit of the guaranteed but silent benefit of dew on grass, you then, even when the king is silent, then you can know that he'll benefit you, and it's a guaranteed thing. Okay, so in other words, like, don't misjudge the king, the degree or outcome of the king's wrath and favor based on how noisy it is or how discernible it is. Judge it based on the fact that this is a king. It's a guarantee that he will pay back for good or for bad, and that it could be extreme. And that should, Rabbeinu Yonah says the purpose of the pasuk is to instill fear of the malchus upon you. But I would say maybe fear is the wrong word, because fear kind of emphasizes the punishment aspect. It should really be like the awareness of like the I'm trying to think of a good word.
Guarantee.
Yeah, it's putting the emphasis on the guarantee, like that this is something that you can be certain about, that is sure to come and sure to have a big impact. And if you actually look, I don't think I read this yesterday. Look at the Metzudas David on the bottom right. Naham Gomer, Pa'as Hamelech Yacharid. The anger of a king is intimidating. Kinahamas, or maybe should be intimidating. I'm not sure if he's saying it in a future tense or tzivui. Kinahamas kfir arayos, like the roar of a lion cub. V'ratan Hamelech Hitova, and the favor of a king is good. Kital hayored al ha'esev, like dew that descends on grass. Now this is the new part. Ki biyad Hamelech l'hashpil o l'romim, because it is within the hands of a king to lower and to raise. Now that to me is slightly different in its application from the Rabbeinu Yonah, which is that, well, you tell me, what do you think when he says, because it's within the power of the king to lower or raise? So from a practical standpoint, why should we care about the phenomenon of the king's anger and favor? It affects us. So like, what would be examples of cases where this advice would apply? Like, who needs to hear this? And it's not one answer. It could be multiple things.
Yeah, I feel like it applies to everything. Like,
Can you be more specific? Yeah. Oh, one point also just from yesterday that I forgot to mention in the review is we said that that this certainly applies to an actual literal king, but we said that you can kind of apply this on a sliding scale to anyone in the position of power. It's just that you have to apply it based on what the limits of their power are. So like, let's say like a very demanding CEO, who has a lot of power, you might apply this. Now he can't kill you, but he can, make your life miserable. He could fire you, et cetera, et cetera. He could promote you, yeah.
But there isn't necessarily the same guarantee that, like, if you do good, he's good.
Yeah, that's the part where, like,
he's a human being, so there's
yeah,
many variables.
Right. In other words, the thing that we said, there's another part I forgot to review. The reason why we said that the king has a guarantee is because, number one, there's nothing holding him back, meaning no one can tell the king what to do. Number two, the king's ego will tend to be big unless he is Marcus Aurelius or Shlomo Melech. But so he has a lot of, it's very likely he'll retaliate or he'll benefit, and then the third thing is, for pragmatic reasons, in order to stay in power and in order to maintain the kavod hamalchus, he will make sure to repay stuff, because if he lets people trample over him and he doesn't retaliate, so then it weakens him. And if he doesn't give benefits to people who favor him, then that runs the risk of like people not being loyal to him. And I gave the example yesterday of like, that's why like Achashverosh, when he was looking through the Chronicle book to see if there were any people who benefited him who he didn't reward, and he found out that no one rewarded Mordecai, he was very like, he acted immediately on that, because he's like, well, if a citizen is going to save the king's life and he doesn't repay them, so then like that's bad luck. Yeah. So with the CEO thing, obviously it's scaled back. None of those are as absolute as they are for a king. So that you need to be more judicious about how, to what extent you apply this.
Right. The concept still carries over.
Yeah, I mean, another example I didn't mention yesterday is like we saw this play out in the last 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, which is that loyalty was his big thing, and like the people who, like, he pardoned Steve Bannon, before he left office, like that's a guy who was loyal to him and got in trouble, and like he paid him back, even though he didn't do it immediately. And similarly, there's more checks in this column, completely wrote off or fired or turned upon the people who he perceived as betraying him, and that was like a guarantee. Like you cannot say that if you upset Donald Trump, then he'll just brush it off. Like that's just not a thing in his capacity. Yeah. So I think in terms of the application of Metzudas David versus Rabbeinu Yonah is putting more of an emphasis on the cautionary aspect of it, of like and he says explicitly, this is for the purpose of the pasuk is to instill fear of the kingship upon you, which means that who's the audience? Someone who does not have sufficient fear of the kingship, or someone who's in danger of lapsing into treating the king casually, which, by the way, is easier to do the closer you are to the king. What is I never like this idiom or this phrase, but familiarity breeds contempt, but like when you're close to someone, then you treat them with less esteem, so it could be very easy for someone who's very close to the king, who sees him all the time, or is like more of a confidant, to like accidentally like upset him or to not regard him as a king. Metzudas David has that message because he says that the king is able to lower, but he's phrasing it equally. The king can lower and the king can raise. So what I think this applies to is someone who is in the political game, who is trying to climb the political ladder, and by political, I don't mean like formally being in politics. I'm saying like if you're in any hierarchical realm, whether it is in the kingship or whether it's in the business or whether it's in like, whatever it is, then, and you want to move ahead and you don't want to move back, then you have to keep this principle in mind in an almost like Machiavellian way of like I have to be very careful with properly interacting with the king based on this principle of reciprocity, that like that's going to be my ticket to raising my stature by benefiting the king, and knowing that even though he's not like telling me that he's going to benefit me, then there's this due benefit that is guaranteed and constant, and being careful to not step on his toes. And like, let's say I do something that he doesn't like and he doesn't say anything, I have to like take the initiative and address that, so and appease him. I can't say, oh, I'll appease him if he expresses his anger. No, like if the anger's there, it's going to come back at you. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but but like, a very, very small version of this is present when I was a high school teacher and we were writing letters of recommendation. Now, obviously, we are always going to want to write good letters of recommendation, but there were definitely kids who would be, let's say, extremely disrespectful to the principal or whatever, and then say like a year later, ask for a letter of recommendation. And like in their mind, it's like, well, that was the past, but kids have a very, very short view of like what matters in time, and like, it's not like a teacher or an administrator is not going to write a letter of recommendation. She has such great mitos if she like was blatant, if she was blatant, like if she was disrespectful and then like changed or like apologize or something like that, so then that's even better than, but like to just assume that misdeeds go like just are forgotten in the sands of time, then that's like, then that's a mistake. And the converse is also true, is like little things that are good, will stick out in the memory of people who have the ability to influence, and like that will that can pay off dividends in the future, you know, even though like the kid might have forgotten about it. Like I'm just thinking in the same realm, like there's a student who's okay, this is a common email system. Like, you know, you have a first letter of your first name and then your full last name, and then like at the at the school. So like there's a student whose parent was a faculty member and happened to have the same first letter of her first name as the last name. So like I remember one time, I think she was like in like maybe like 9th or 10th grade. She saw in her own, the student saw in her own email inbox that someone had sent a letter, an email to thinking that it was her mother, you know, but it was actually like her, and it was like from, like I think it was clear from who it came from that it was like a like sensitive issue. So she didn't open it and just went to the secretary and said, I think this email was sent wrong. Could you like open it and forward it and then delete it from my thing? And like we were so impressed about the fact that like this like, you know, like a 9th or 10th grader who could have just like gotten the dirt on her like classmate or whatever, you know, like just like did this responsible thing. And like I think we probably all mentioned that as an example of like her good qualities in letters of recommendation. So like it goes both ways, you know, like these things can people who are in a position of influence have long memories, you know, when it comes to advancing your position or like or knocking you down or preventing your advancement. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a sufficient clarity. I mean, is it clear? Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I don't sense any outstanding problems. Okay,
Right.
so now here's the thing. When I was first looking at this, I saw Rashi, okay, and classic Rashi, top left, Zaf Melech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So again, that's a classic Rashi in terms of A, interpreting it metaphorically, B, interpreting king as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And the frustrating thing is he says nothing else. As if it's pasuk that we know what it means. Okay, so I was prepared to like just brush this off and be like, okay, that's Rashi's whole approach. But I know a lot of other mafarshim do say this. Okay, so for example, look at the Meiri, bottom or middle right. Naham kafir zaf melech ukatal esav retono Amar. So he said, Shakas melech v'chamaso he shaga mevaheles umachberes, that the anger of a king and his wrath is the frightening and intimidating roar of a lion. Like the roar of a lion, which is the loudest of the roars. By the way, side point, this seems to be taking kafir as like lion, not young lion, because we said that like over the Ariel's fact about from Animal Planet or whatever, that the roar of a lion is like the loudest roar or something, you know. So I think it's clear he means like it's a real lion or an adult lion. Okay, Ritzono and his favor, Ritzono or piuso, Eitzel hanirtze. Okay, so that's actually a different, that's not favor, his appeasement, I think, pius. His appeasement vis-a-vis the Eitzel hanirtze etzlo, vis-a-vis the one who is favorable to him, who katal al esev, is like dew on grass, shetualto masmedes below hefsek, whose benefit is continual without cessation. I think that's like what we said yesterday, that dew is every morning. You get dew every morning. And then he says, Ritzona balaz, I couldn't figure out what French word this was. I don't know. Sometimes you can like guess in Google Translate, even though it's modern French, and then store like that it still is this didn't work, or at least I didn't do it right. Okay, so far we don't know exactly what he's saying, but then he gives the idea. This is warning you not to do an action that angers the king, and to strive to do actions that appease him and find favor with him and appease him. Now, that I think is like compatible with Rabbeinu Yonah and Metzudas. Like he is not saying the same idea as Rabbeinu Yonah, but like the nafkamin is the same. Okay.
Wait,
yeah.
Hold on. Historical question.
Yeah.
Meiri was around the same time as Rashi.
As Rashi?
Yeah.
No, much later.
Used in French.
And not even the same place.
Oh,
yeah.
So the French word.
Oh, so this is a fact I only learned this year.
Mm-hmm.
So southern France and northern France, throughout much of the Rishonic period, was like two completely different countries. Okay, in the sense that northern France in Rashi's time was, you know, massive influence of Christians crusaders. I don't know when the crusades were, but like either like this was either during, before, after. And like the evidence, one of the manifestations of this is, Rashi and the Bali Tosfos, very, very little, if at all, involvement in philosophy and writing about philosophy and all that other stuff. Southern France in Provence, where the Meiri was much closer to Spain of the Rambam in the sense of vibrant, rationalistic, intellectual, philosophical culture, and that's why the Meiri was much more into writing about that kind of stuff and like much more philosophical and much more rationalistic. And so even though they spoke the same language, it wasn't the same language. It was
Right.
yeah. And again, I'm not a historian. I don't know when things changed. Like maybe by the time the Meiri was there, the northern France was different. But I definitely know that like Rashi, Rashbam, Rabbeinu Tam, the Bali Tosfos in that early part in the 1100s or 11th century, like that was very different than Meiri in the 14th century. Yeah. Okay. So then he says, so now he says, also it's talking about God in the Derech Nister. Derech Nister Yavuar Ha'inyan al Malcho Shel Olam. So in the Derech Nister, which I'll explain what that is in a second, it's actually I'll explain what it is now. So I wrote an article about this. And I might have said this earlier in Mishlei. Meiri has two layers of interpretation of every pasuk: the Derech Nigla, the surface meaning or the open meaning, and then the Derech Nister, the hidden or beneath the surface meaning. And my understanding of the Meiri is what he does is he takes the idea in the Derech Nigla and applies the exact same idea to a different subject matter. So the Nigla is about everyday decisions and physical success, material and material failure. And then the Nister is about success as a Tzelem Elokim. So it could be about your learning, it could be about your relationship with God, it could be about tefillah, it could be about hashgacha, it could be about Torah. And the example I give, because I think it stands out, is because people are familiar with it, is in Eifus Chayil. So Darshat Semer Upishtim Vatas B'Chevetz Kapeha. So her hands work. She seeks wool and flax. Semer Upishtim, wool and flax. Vatas B'Chevetz Kapeha, and her hands work with desire. So Shat, the Nigla, it's talking about an actual woman in a household, and what it's saying is that even when she's gathering the raw materials for her crafts, then she will have attention to quality, and her hands will work as much with desire in the non-glamorous parts of the craft, like sifting through like wool bins and flax bins. I don't know how they sold wool and flax to like get the best stuff. She'll have the same amount of desire there as she does when she's actually like making her clothing, and that's like a sign of a chachama or a chacham where like the fool just wants to be involved in the glorious part of the process and doesn't really bother himself with like the mundane like material stuff. But a chacham realizes, number one, that the quality of the material affects the quality of the end product. And if you care about the end product, you care about the material. And secondly, the chacham realizes that there's chachma in the selection of the material. All right, so that's Derech Nigla. But now what's Nister? Nister is about perfection of the intellect. So what's the material in perfecting the intellect? It's gathering the facts. If it's in science, it's like gathering data. If it's in Torah, it's like having bekius and like, or in a particular sugya, like making sure you got all the facts. So the fool just wants to jump right to the svara because that's the fun part, But the chacham realizes svara must be built on a solid, comprehensive, accurate, factual base. And there is a certain chachma and organization and clarity and enjoyment of going through the facts and preparing it for the svara, and he'll give attention to that. So that's what I mean when the Nigla and the Nister in the Meiri, it's the same idea, just applied to a different subject matter. So now the question is like this, is we understand based on Rabbeinu Yonah and the Metzudas David that you have to be very careful not to anger the king and that you have to have like awareness of how much he can benefit you and strive to like derive benefit from him. Yeah.
Question on that?
Yeah.
That example, it seems like that's just an example of like how to apply the pasuk. Like why is that a different thing?
Yeah.
Pasuk to different.
Well, so I mean, again, that's my understanding of what he means by Derech Nister, which is that it is, meaning, let me put it a different way. There are approaches to Mishlei where the idea and the way that you learn the Nigla is different than the idea and the way you learn the Nister. In my experience, that's not how the Meiri rolls. So it's just that the average person who's learning Mishlei will not be interested in intellectual perfection. So he's just going to like latch onto the surface meaning. But the person who's learning Mishlei to perfect his intellect will apply those ideas to success in his life as a Tzalma Elokim.
Okay.
So it's not like, I mean, so in other words, that's one of the reasons I like the Meiri's Derech Nister, because number one, it's not as speculative. It's not like you're just like saying, well, maybe this is a muscle for that, and like just running wild. You're taking an idea that you have gotten through analysis in the Nigle, and then you are gaining additional dimension by like applying it to stuff that the average student of Mishlei is not interested in.
Okay.
I don't know if that's addressing what was bothering you about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it just seems like you can apply it to, like, in terms of that, you can apply it to learning, let's say,
Yeah.
because learning is an activity.
Yes,
Like
right.
the subject matter of the pasuk is activities in general. This is how you deal
Right.
with activities.
Yeah.
And Torah is one of the activities. So like it just seems like, I guess maybe you're just making it explicit. Like that's just an important activity. So it's like
Yeah, and again, I don't know whether all of them have that same degree of ease of just like a different example. Like I think that seems to be what's bothering is like it's just a different example. It's not like a new.
yeah, there's no new wrinkle. Like,
Yeah, right. So that I've definitely seen a lot in the Meiri, but I don't know if all of them are like that. I choose that as a simple example to illustrate the derech of the Meiri, but I don't know if that's consistent because because again I'm a little bit new to the derech nister of the Meiri, and this would be a good test case, right? So here he says, "Derech nister yavur ha'inin al malchus ha'olam." This is talking about the king of the world. Hein b'kiyum darkei haTorah v'nesivoseha, whether in the fulfillment of the ways of Torah and its paths. I assume that means like halacha and like midos. V'hein b'limud hachachma l'hiskariv eleha ve'elav k'fi hayacholas, or whether it's in the learning of chachma to draw close to it, meaning to chachma, and to him, to God, k'fi hayacholas, to the extent possible. Ki hahisrachak mimenu umidrachav hu haketzav hagadav, because one who distances himself from God and from his ways, that is going to, I assume he said that is great wrath. I assume it means it's going to awaken great wrath. The question is, how does this idea apply to God? And like, what's the chiddush? Meaning that there was a clear chiddush, to me at least, for Rabbeinu Yonah, of you would be inclined to make this mistake of treating the king like an average person, and like thinking if he doesn't say anything, then he's not angry, and if he doesn't say anything, then he's not happy, and then like making mistakes about how you interact with the king on the micro or macro level based on that assumption. But God, like what's the chiddush there? Like, if you get close to him, then he favors you, and if you get far away from him, he's angry. It's like a big deal,
Right, but it doesn't. There's no immediate.
Okay, good. So I think that has to be the first step, right? Is that the similarity between the human king and God is even more exaggerated in the case of God because there is no direct, like with a king at least, like he might yell at you, or like he might say, "Good job," like here's a plot of land, or whatever kings did back then. But with Hashem, it's unless you're a Navi, like you're not getting that sort of direct feedback, Okay, so I think that's a good first step. So now the question,
I'd say even more subtly, like let's say you do something to the king, you could see that he like frowns for a second, and then he like maybe he like composes himself, but like.
But if you see God frown, then you're worshiping the wrong God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I guess the question is, so this is a much more, okay, so maybe this is like what you were looking for, is structurally the idea is similar and intellectually it makes sense. Now the question is, how do you apply it? Like, I feel like it's not the same, it's not just another, it's not like, in other words, applying it from king to CEO is just a difference in quantity, but applying it from human king to divine king, I feel like that takes a different like level of harnessing or approaching or internalizing the idea. So how do we do that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's more, I guess, like tragic because of the fact that like you're never gonna have like a direct response from God, and so like maybe that's what we need to stress even more, that like you need to like the guarantee that like this is not a human king, that it's different. So yes, you never get a direct response, but a byproduct of never getting a direct response is that there always is a response.
Yeah.
And you're never gonna get it.
Yeah, I also sense that the actually I don't even know, I just projected onto you. I don't know if you were talking about when you said that, did you have in mind both halves of the puzzle or a specific one? Okay, yeah, because I think that's the correct answer. So I was thinking, no, I mean, I think that's clearly the correct answer according to Meiri, but let's play it out on each side though, okay? Because, so I first went to the benefit thing, is I think one of the struggles that people have in keeping halakha, and I don't mean keeping halakha like, I don't mean in the sense of people who are on the fence about whether to keep halakha or not. I don't know if this is going to help that. I think that sometimes you find yourself in regards to certain halachos of like, what am I getting out of this? Like, this is tedious, this is frustrating, this is, you know, and you know, obviously everyone has different areas of halacha where they have that feeling. For some people it's davening, for some people it's like kashrus, for some people it's like not cheating on their taxes, you know, and like it's the lack of direct and visible feedback makes that compounds that problem, you know. But the recognition of there are phenomena in the world that are consistently tremendously beneficial, like dew, that you don't think about the dew every morning, but like when you do think about it, you realize, oh, it's always there. And again, it's hard for us to relate to dew, but like we got to find like a modern example, you know, Wi-Fi, you know, like it's always there. And it is always beneficial, and you can always like rely on it, and like that awareness I feel like can keep you going in a motivational way when you realize that it's contingent on you like fulfilling God's will. Meaning that like when you, I'll give you an example in davening, you know, like one of the problems that people have with davening is that you get through these dry periods where you feel like I'm not getting anything out of the davening. It's like, why do I keep on doing it? You know? And one of the things I try to point out is like part of the nature, like there's a thing, I've never seen this quote inside, but like the Rav said that like you need to go through a lot of Yom Kippurs before you can have a really good Yom Kippur, you know, where like part of the thing is you are going over the same ideas mindfully and mindlessly every day. And the tremendous life-changing insights you have from davening come up, you know, only because you have maintained that level of dedication and effort. In other words, if you only did what a lot of people want to do, which is I only will daven when I have kavanah, so that you're not going to have kavanah and you're not going to get these insights. It's the constant like application of yourself to this habit that tills the soil from which like, you know, you can have like a productive like insight or transformative like level up, you know. So what I'm saying is that like that's the attitude that we have to have when fulfilling God's will, which is that the activities we're involved in, whether it be mitzvos or learning Torah, are inherently beneficial, and the benefits will accrue to us at some point or over time incrementally through continued dedication to this activity, even though we don't see it on a one-to-one ratio or in a manifest or in a loud way. And that I'm saying that awareness can keep you going in this activity, you know. Now you need a certain level of maturity to be able for it to keep you going. I don't think you're going to be able to tell an 8th grader like, yeah, just daven every day and like it'll change you one day. Like that's not, you know, that's not going to help that person. You know, you need a certain level of intellectual and emotional maturity, you know. And similarly, now with the first side, I think you can tell someone because fear is much easier to get to tap into than motivating benefit, is that like, you know, like it's like the last pasuk in Koheles that God will bring you to justice for every action, whether good or bad, you know, like that there is nothing that is not reckoned, you know, there's not like, you know, that doesn't have its consequence, you know, and like you might not see the consequence, it might not like come up, you might not be able to even connect the consequence when you get it to the action that brought it about, but like it's a sure thing that if you neglect chachma or if you neglect mitzvos, like there will be consequences for each instance of neglect, guaranteed. And that can help you when you're on the fence between like, should I care so much about this little thing or not? Like, what's the big deal if I like cut corners here or if I, do this here?
Is that talking about like consequences like in Olam Haba, or is that like physics?
So I was using the word consequences intentionally because it's the broadest term.
Okay.
So I'd say, I think there's like 4 consequences, 4 categories. There's Olam Haba, which is very hard to actually care about. There's the natural results of doing the mitzvos in Olam Hazeh, and the natural harms of doing the of neglecting the mitzvahs of doing averos, like natural consequences, like Mishlei things. That's really, I think, the easiest to relate to. And then there is the system of brachos and klalos of whatever your understanding is of that hashgacha. That this is also true of, but that's also very hard to relate to. And then there's the onshim of Beit Din, which is really like almost not really relevant to us right now, and that's not even back then. I don't even think that category would apply here because those are very specific parameters, and it's not guaranteed that you're going to get a consequence from Beit Din, But those are the 4 like frameworks of reward and punishment that we care about, So I would say that in the Mishleic world, or at least the level that we're on right now, realizing that there are consequences in hashgacha klalis for every instance of kiyum hamitzvah and avera, and even though like it might not be huge, and it might not be soon, but there are consequences. You cannot that's the type of creature we are. Is we live in a world of cause and effect, and there's a fantasy that I can do an action and it just won't have any impact on anything else, and that's just not true. Every action has an impact that pushes you, shapes your values in one way, shapes your ideas in one way, fuels the descent into a bad midah, prompts you into the formation of a good habit.
Did you give me?
Yeah, like let's say, for example, you have a particular area like that you want me to give an example in. I mean,
No.
all right, fine. Let's give a Stam example. Like, and by the way, I have to. I forgot to say, I have to go exactly at 9:15 today because I have a meeting. So we might have to get cut off. Let's say like one act of lashon hara or one act of refilos. So it's very easy to dismiss that and say like let's say even though it's usher, but what are you doing anytime you say a statement of lashon hara? So you are subtly reinforcing the idea that of a relative value system where you're measuring your self-worth based on where you stand in relation to your fellow person. Like by degrading them and by getting pleasure out of that, I feel better about myself. Now that has nothing to do with reality. Like the fact that this person may or may not have a bad quality has nothing to do with who you are and your level of perfection in reality. So why are you feeling good about the fact that this person failed at something or is less than you, and you are attaching yourself to a habit of treating other people as objects of your pleasure, treating people's kavod and esteem and standing as objects of your pleasure, which will affect the way that you relate to other people. Like you're not relating to them as Tzelem Elokim, you're relating to them as like, I can talk about this person to get pleasure out of at their expense. You are putting out into the world, in terms of people who you're talking to, negative views of this person, which will have real world effects on how they interact with the person and on how you interact with the person. And again, this is just like, it could be like one statement, but like you are shaping your psyche, you're shaping your value system, you're setting out a chain of cause and effect in reality by doing that, and that will culminate in harm. Now, it might not destroy the person's life, it might not make you into an evil person, or it might, but it's these little things. It's like the water on the rock. Like little things will shape things over time and make you more prone to it in the future. And that's mitzvah guruf mitzvah and avera guruf avera. Like the more you indulge in that one bad type of speech, you will be more prone to doing that in the future, and that will have more effects. That's like one example. But yeah. All right. Sorry, I gotta stop now. All right. Tomorrow, new pasuk?
Yes.
Okay.